with every system comes the sum of its defaults. When we neglect to set up systems, we kind of set ourselves up for failure. We cannot find stability without a foundation. With stability, we create that foundation that steadily builds us towards our ultimate destination. The dedication that we pour into our discipleship will ultimately determine our path. And you may be thinking, oh, I'm talking about, how to build a better life. Not really. But I'll get into it, But you can't fixate on how far a car is supposed to travel without ignoring the fuel that is needed. It's like trying to construct a house without a blueprint. Without the right systems in place, the house will crumble at the first storm. And failing, to create these systems, we fail to nurture our potential. We fail to nurture the person that we're supposed to be, our destination, whether it be personal or even spiritual, whether it be, athletic, academic, Either of those things requires us to intentionally lay out steps, providing consistent fuel for the journey ahead. Without any of those systems, without intentionality, without structure, we drift, missing the opportunity to just grow and become the people that we're supposed to be. When you fail to build structure, you start to form habits. You start to form habits of always laying bricks, always trying to build somewhere through intention or neglect. Without shoot, without that system, you start to live on autopilot. Without that system, you start to live in systems that you didn't set, but you inherited from family, from trauma, from culture. And when you don't confront them, we find ourselves living within blueprints that we really never drew. And I'm speaking to the men here. Speaking to the men here. A lot of us grew up within broken systems and just kept walking. We didn't question. We didn't think that anything was wrong. We saw, maybe some of our fathers, just consistently being workaholics, beating themselves up on a day-to-day basis. Some of us maybe saw that alcoholics. You never really questioned the wiring. You never asked who put the walls there. You never asked even if they're needed. You just made it a home. You just made it something that was normal to you. But survival is not the same thing as thriving. That's where discipleship comes in. It's not just a spiritual practice, but it's as intentional architecture. You cannot, like I said earlier, you cannot fixate on how far a car is supposed to go without using the fuel that powers it. Ambition without sustainability is sometimes just burnout dressed as bravery. You cannot continue to say, oh, I'm going to get this. You have to find ways to live within the system that you want to build. So much men are chasing these big dreams, chasing distance without checking their tank, without checking how much gas that they have, or worth filling up on even just validation, hustle culture, or emotional silence, or emotional neglect. They're using that to power them all the way to a destination. When that destination doesn't pan out the way they want it, they blame the world. They use these things thinking it'll carry them so far. But when they start drifting, when they start, going down the wrong road, they start to, blame the system that got them there. But drifting is what happens when nobody teaches you how to build direction. Drifting is what happens when nobody teaches you discipline. Drifting is what happens when nobody lets you know that the road that you're so comfortable with is the wrong road. And what happens when that drifting starts to happen is that, you start to see all these other routes, and your mind starts to get, confused. Is this the way I'm supposed to go? Is this the way I'm supposed to go? When you're comfortable, you're only stuck with one thing, And I would hate for any of us to drift into a place where we can no longer return. Where you're not told that the systems that were built around you are just for organized people. You start to think that, they're not for the wounded. You start to think that these only systems are only made for people that have their life in order. Systems are only made for people that, you know, have everything down from A to Z. No, they're for the wounded too. This is how we protect purpose from pain. When we talk about systems, we're not talking about just, you know, planning out or, you know, schedules or productivity tools. You know, we're not talking about, how to how to plan your year in nah, we're not talking about that here. I'm not talking about that, at least me. Some people may be talking about that, but I'm not. I'm talking about the internal frameworks with how you live by, you know, beliefs, routines, reactions. And when those go unchecked, you know, the defaults take over. And whatever our defaults is, it may be healthy, it may not be healthy. Sometimes those defaults that most men learn are default settings of survival and not peace. They were put in survival mode and they weren't designed for peace. They were designed to keep him breathing and not becoming. You know, they were made to keep him alive, not meant to see him live. You know, and there comes a point in time where we start to question the life that we're breathing. We start to question the life that we once lived and saying, was I really living or was I just getting by? You know, without intentionally rewriting your system, you're just meant to keep repeating codes passed down from generation, from men who never knew how to cry, from men who never knew how to rest, from men who never knew how to weep, from men who weren't allowed to pause, from men who thought anger and silence was safety, from men who thought that, you know, from men who thought emotional neglect was power. I'm here to let you know that you no longer have to hide from yourself. You no longer have to hide from being human. You know, it's something that you need to acknowledge. You know, we're going to be human for as long as we live on this entire earth. You cannot run from that person. You cannot run from that framework, you know, unless you want to be an alien or something. I mean, shit, go ahead and knock it out the ballpark. But you're going to remain human for the rest of your life. And I think it's time that we learn how to do that. You know, sometimes the enemy of growth isn't always sin. Sometimes it's passivity. Sometimes it's just sitting around waiting for the right day to come. It's waiting for, you know, waiting for the right moment. You know, we've been conditioned to only call out, you know, the loud enemies, you know, the big sins, the visible stumbles, the fire and brimstone kind of failings. But the silent killers, the numbness, the delay, the man who knows he's called but never moves, that is, I think, what kills most men before their time. You know, passivity is dangerous because it wears the mask of peace. It wears the mask of, oh, you know, I'm just waiting on God. But deep down, it's just fear dressed in scripture. And, you know, it leaves the potential, leaves the field of our potential untended to. You know, no seeds planted. You're just there in a garden of nothing. No roots deepened, just dry soil and dreams deferred. You know, when you fail to build that system, you don't just wait another day. You know, you give up your right to momentum, you know. And one thing about momentum is that it's not neutral. You're either moving forward or you're moving backwards. You know, who are you when the pendulum has stopped swinging? You know, standing still in the kingdom is an illusion sometimes. God's story keeps unfolding. And if we don't step into the rhythm that he said, then we miss our verse in the song. You know. Wow. We miss our verse in the song. You know. Sometimes we try to wait for, you know, the perfect time, because that's all we've been conditioned to think, you know, that time is conditioned to follow after us. Time has been, you know, made to care after us. But you have to tell yourself that you will not wait until the storm to build your shelter. You will not hope to be strong when you've never trained in stillness. You will not ask for direction if you refuse to walk. If you refuse to ask for any of those things, then I think that, or even acknowledge it, then you are delaying something. You're scared, actually. I think we become scared of the person that we can become sometimes. I think we become scared of, you know, leaving something that we're comfortable with for things that we don't know about. And in that comfortability, we sometimes, you sometimes give up on our dreams because it's out there. You can see it, but you don't want to get up. You can see it, but you don't want to go and grab it. You can see it, but you don't want to go and find that thing that's for you, because you sat so much in this sloth-like habit that it starts to feel like home. You've been conditioned that the world out there is going to kill you, but if anything, it's going to make you. You know, tell my men out there that want to be better. You already can. You just have to walk. You just have to walk. You don't. It doesn't have to be big, gigantic steps. It doesn't have to be what the world has taught you, or you have to go from point A to point B within one day. No, it doesn't have to be that. You know, we've been conditioned that instant gratification is something that is the only thing that can make us valid as men. But no, as your story keeps unfolding, you'll unlock new points that you can sit at, that you can unlock new checkpoints. It doesn't have to be some kind of instant transmission kind of thing. All you have to do is keep walking. All you have to do is keep going. You know, do not let anybody else throw you off your square, throw you off your circle, throw you off your whatever shape you want to call it. This is your walk and your walk only. And we have to become comfortable with what it is. But you cannot walk if you do not build a system. If you do not build something that's going to keep you walking. Because if you're just walking, you're going to stumble across the wrong things. And that is going to even make you the man that you fear. If you enjoyed this video, thank you. If you didn't enjoy this video, thank you. Thank you for watching, honestly. If you have anything you want to say or even recommend, leave it in the comments down below. You should have liked the video if you liked it, and dislike it if you didn't like it. You know, let me know. I want to thank you all again for watching. May post again today to make up for June 1st, because I was out on June 1st. I didn't get to make a video. Yeah, trying to post every day for Men's Mental Health Month. So I'm kind of awkward at these outros, bro. Don't mind me, but appreciate you all. Love you all. Thank you so much.